Hello, BookTube. I've got a tag for you, believe it or not, on Wednesday instead of Tuesday. It's an original tag done by Bill Ruttenberg at the Ruttenberg Library, and he only tagged two people, and I was one of them. So I figured I should do it, and I shouldn't wait a whole week to do it. It's the Abraham Lincoln book tag, which is extremely predictable coming from Bill because he's a big Civil War reader and he loves Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln is a genuinely fascinating figure in American history, I would say in world history. So it's understandable that not only is he a fascination of Bill's, but also that he is the subject of a cottage industry of books. And that's what this tag is all about. I've got it on the iPad here. So I thought we'd go through the prompts. Some of them aren't going to work for me, but I'll do the best that I can. Prompt number one is, what was your first book about Abraham Lincoln? And believe it or not, I don't want to stoke the speculation that I am in fact 200 years old, that I was in fact the Steve Donahue who was a jockey in the Victorian era. I don't want to fuel that, but nevertheless, my first Abraham Lincoln book was his campaign biography in 1860. If you're a product of the 21st century, you're accustomed to every political candidate in the world having a terrified ghostwriter churn out a pile of absolutely pallid pap that is their campaign biography. And then they have other terrified underlings ghost buy many copies of it in an attempt to gerrymander the New York Times bestseller list. And the books are utterly worthless. I have read so many of them that when you see that phenomenon, you think automatically that it must be just a 21st century thing, but it's not. It's not. It's been going on for a long time. And candidate Abraham Lincoln's people commissioned a writer to write his campaign biography, and it came out in 1860. And that writer got a reward. there was a nominal amount of payment, but the writer also got an award. He got posted to Venice on a no-show, no-work diplomatic sinecure in Venice, and that writer was William Dean Howells, who I love, who was a fixture of the Boston literary scene. He wasn't from Boston himself, but he was a fixture of the Boston literary scene for a long time. So that was my first one. I don't have a copy of that 1860 biography, but I do have a copy of the two books that William Dean Howells wrote about his Italian adventures. So, and they are much better. I read his Lincoln biography, and his Italian books are much better. So I have the best fruits of that gig. Then prompt number two is, what book really sparked your interest to learn more about Abe's life? I've never actually had that interest. I opened this video by saying that Lincoln is one of the most genuinely fascinating figures in American or world history. I fully believe that. But you can't dictate where your own personal interests will go, right? A person can be as interesting as the day is long. If you're not interested in them, you're not interested in them. It's just the simple truth. And I share Bill Ruttenberg's estimation of this figure. I think in a weird way, Abraham Lincoln might be one of the most formidable characters, one of the highest estimable characters in American history, in a complicated way. The nice thing about Bill's hero worship of Abraham Lincoln is that it's not blind to the complications. Lincoln was certainly not perfect. But I might share his estimate of this figure, but I don't feel that pull. I'm never going to have 20 Lincoln books here in the little book room. I will read every new mainstream book that comes out about him that isn't just pure hagiography. I do that anyway. But it won't be with that same spark. I never, for instance, when I've read biographies of him, and I've read a lot of biographies of Lincoln, I've never had the urge to learn more about his life. So there hasn't been a book. That's one of the questions that's going to disappoint here. Then move on to question 3. What is the best book about Abe's childhood/early life up until he goes into politics? And that would probably be Self-Made Man by Sidney Blumenthal. Sidney Blumenthal is doing a multi-volume biography of Abraham Lincoln that has, I think, probably 2 or maybe even 3 volumes to go. A very, very rare thing for a publisher to sign off on a multi-volume life of anyone, even Lincoln, who is guaranteed money in the bank. He's guaranteed money in the bookstores. It's a very rare thing for an author to want to do it for the 21st century, which has no attention span at all. You don't even remember my answers to the first question of this tag, much less the attention span necessary, the Victorian attention span necessary to read a multi-volume biography of someone. But also just the market itself, which just doesn't support these things anymore. But Blumenthal has been doing it anyway, and he's a very good, very smart writer, and all the volumes have been really good. I can't wait to see what I'm assuming will be the concluding 2 volumes. I can't wait to read them. But Self-Made Man is all the volumes, of course, so far have been about Lincoln before he entered politics, and their Self-Made Man is really, really good. If your library is investing in this multi-volume set, you might want to try it. Then question number 4 is, what book does the best at highlighting Abe's personality? And I'm going to say here, there was a book that was edited by Tom Horrocks and Harold Hoser called The Annotated Lincoln. An oversized thing, full of illustrations, full of annotations. A really wonderful volume. That I think I reviewed The Annotated Lincoln. I'm pretty sure that I did. I don't remember where I did. Probably for Open Letters. Probably the review is on stevedonahue.com, which I can't remember off the top of my head right now. If I link to stevedonahue.com on these videos, you've got a lot of links on these videos. But probably that would be the one, because in order to do the best job of getting at Lincoln's personality, you have to scrub away the hero worship. You have to do that. Or you won't get anywhere near his personality. You'll get near, I don't know, even something even worse than the confectionery thing that Howells came up with for that campaign biography. And the Annotated Lincoln does that. So that'd probably be my choice there. Then question number 5 is, what is the best political, i.e. pre-Civil War or Civil War era book? And here I'm going to pick James Oakes's book, The Crooked Path to Abolition, which I liked quite a bit when it first came out. And the more I've thought about it, the more I've remembered it, the more I've liked it. That is a perfect example of a book I got. I got the Unbound Galley, I got the Galley, I got the finished copy, and wish that I'd kept one. I wish that I'd kept some version of that book. I don't have a physical copy of it at all, and I wish that I had, because it was quite good. And that is the prompt here is political, and that is the political evolution of Lincoln. Then let's see here. Question number 6 is, what is a book or two that you bought during a trip to a Lincoln site, the Lincoln Museum, the home, Washington, D.C.? I honestly don't have a good... I know that the answer to this question is supposed to be Lincoln-related, and I don't have a good Lincoln-related answer. I don't do stuff like that. I usually avoid commemorative stuff like that when I go to gift shops, for instance. If I go to the American Museum of Natural History, the gift shop is going to be full of the coolest things in the world. So I will get something there. But if I go to, like, I don't even know, a Manet exhibit at an art museum, and there are a whole bunch of commemorative books or whatnot, I usually won't get them. I usually won't bother at all. Not only because the kind of signing up for the adventure stuff there is more of a team sport than I'm accustomed to, but also because it's a little bit queasy making for me to spend money on a new book of any kind. So the one that I came up with here was, the one that came to mind was Eagle in the Snow by Wallace Bream, which is a Roman historical novel. I got it in Washington, D.C. years and years ago on the same trip where of course, when you're in D.C., you go to the Lincoln Memorial. The Lincoln Memorial is, I know there are crowds, and they've all got ill-advised clothing on, and they're all loud, and they're all rude and whatnot, but the Lincoln Memorial is not overbuilt. It will still you. It really will still you. It is an amazing public monument. Just amazing. The most amazing public monument in Washington, D.C., which has no shortage of public monuments. It's astonishing. There's only one piece of sculpture I know of in the United States that comes anywhere close to having the same emotional effect on me when I am in its physical presence. And that is the statue that Henry Adams commissioned for his dead wife. But the Lincoln Memorial has power in addition to sorrow. It's an amazing experience. I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you are going to visit the United States sometime in the next 4 months, and if in the next 4 months you're going to visit Washington, D.C., you should definitely go to the Lincoln Memorial. And don't talk when you're there. Go, and as the West Wing says, and as Richard Nixon, one of the only dignified things he ever did in his entire administration, as all these people say, go to Lincoln and listen. Go to the Lincoln Memorial and simply stand there and take it in. And I want to stress, if you're thinking about doing that, make sure you do that before the autumn of 2024. Make sure you do that. Take my word for it. Anytime after that, Washington, D.C. is going to be the last place, literally anywhere on Earth, that you're going to want to be. So don't go there then. Don't plan for it then. Don't say, oh, well, it'll all blow over. Our vacation is in February for Valentine's Day. Let's go to the Capitol. But Eagle in the Snow is really good. It's not really the thing for a tag here. Well, let's see if we can do better with the next one. Number 7, what is the best book that showcases Lincoln's military strategy as commander-in-chief? Again, I'm letting the side down here because I've read a number of books like that and they're all hogwash. Or they might be good in terms of the author's historical knowledge, but they don't answer the question or even address it. Because Lincoln didn't have, he of course said over and over again to anyone who would listen, especially his generals, that he didn't have any military training at all, except what he read in Xenophon and whatnot. And he didn't have any military strategy except take their armies off the board. You let me worry about international alliances. I will send a dyed-in-the-wool 5-generation Bostonian to London to make sure that there are no international alliances. You let me worry about the trade that is bringing goods and supplies to their ports. You let me worry about all of that. What I want you to do, if I'm putting you in the field with all these volunteers from Maine and Iowa, I want you to take their armies off the field. Without their armies, they're nothing. They don't have any international alliances. They don't have anything. Without their armies, they're nothing. That's my strategy. Could you please stop pussyfooting around and take their armies? And, that as a military strategy, that is, of course, very sound. It's not very nuanced, but it can't fill a book. So I don't know of any book that does a really good job on this subject. So I'm letting the side down again. Let's see here. Question number 8 is, what is the best book if somebody wants to learn about Lincoln's family? That is, Mary Todd Lincoln, Robert Lincoln, anything like that. Here I want to stick up for Ishbel Ross. She wrote a book a long time ago called The President's Wife. She wrote a lot of great books. They're very, very spirited. I don't know if they're on Project Gutenberg. I'm pretty sure that no Ishbel Ross is still in print. But The President's Wife is delightful. If you can find a copy, it's delightful. Then question number 9 is, what is your favorite Lincoln book that details a year in the life of Abe? Such as a book about his final months as president, etc. Here it would have to be Harold Holzer, I mentioned earlier in this tag. He wrote a book called The President-Elect. Harold Holzer has a gift for writing about Lincoln. Not only an incredible confidence with handling a vast amount of scholarship, but also the ability on the page. There are other people who also have mastered the scholarship and the primary resources and whatnot, but Holzer knows Lincoln. He gets him on the page. It really feels that way. He's written a number of books about Lincoln. The one that sold was Lincoln and the Power of the Press, which dealt with Lincoln suppressing the free press during the American Civil War, which was illegal and unconstitutional. The press is guaranteed in the same Constitution that guarantees the president his power on equal footing. But nevertheless, he did it, and Holzer's book is great on the subject. But President-elect deals with just the time between when Lincoln was elected president and when he took office. And you would think that wouldn't be grounds for a terrific book, but boy, oh boy, is it. The President-elect is a terrific book. Then question number 10 is, what is your go-to book / books about the Lincoln assassination and the events surrounding it? John Wilkes Booth, Ford's Theater, etc., etc. And here, here I want to say, Blood on the Moon by Ed Steers, which is, I think, the best book ever done on the Lincoln assassination. That feels a little bit disloyal in an odd way. Blood on the Moon is great. It's a great book to have. It is one of, if you weren't going to overdo it like Bill does, if you were just going to have one shelf of Lincoln books, you'd of course want a book just dedicated to the end of Lincoln's life. Every Lincoln biography has a chapter like that. Most of those chapters are really good. But you'd want a book just dedicated to that, and this Blood on the Moon would be the one to have. It feels a little disloyal for me to say that because Jim Bishop wrote a book called The Day Lincoln Was Shot, and it was a huge bestseller, just gigantic bestseller. And in addition to that, it was Miss Sainted Ma used to carry a book with her at all times in her pocketbook. Not because she was a reader. She wasn't a reader. I'm saving my eyes, is what she used to say. Until she was in her early 90s, when she would say that to me, and I'd say, well, what are you saving them for, Ma? The organ donation bank. And she'd say, that's your mother you're talking to, you know? No, she kept a book with her at all times in order to do combat with her mortal enemies, bees. She hated bees. And the book that she kept with her became known colloquially in the family as her bee book. And forever and ever, a little paperback copy of The Day Lincoln Was Shot was her bee book. So I feel a little disloyal not using it, especially since it is a really good book. But I had to... Blood on the Moon is better. It's, of course, better. Then let's see here. Question number 11 is, what is your favorite miscellaneous book about Lincoln? A book that doesn't seem to fit into any one category. I just got it the other day. I don't have it with me here, but it's a Library of America volume about Lincoln from the viewpoint of all kinds of different people, from poets and biographers and whatnot. I'm pretty sure it's the only Library of America volume like that, so I think it's called The Lincoln Reader. But you'll be able to find it easily. And I got it. I got a used copy just recently, I think a month ago. Read it and just fell into it. It is so good. It is so well curated, would be the horrible 21st century word. It's so good that would probably be. That's kind of a miscellaneous because you don't know what's going to strike any writer about this guy. The people who knew him, or the people who know him only through his legend and his history. Question number 12 is, what is a fun story you have relating to the purchase of an Abraham Lincoln book? And here I wanted to get all bratty, speaking as a book reviewer, and say, people purchase books? But I don't have any fun stories about purchasing. I haven't purchased an Abraham Lincoln book in eons, except as a gift for other people. If I find, for instance, I have access to a huge amount of used books here in Boston when it's not boiling hot, when it's not 95 degrees Fahrenheit. I have access to a huge amount of books. So if I'm at the Brattle Bookshop, for instance, and there's a bonanza of Abraham Lincoln books, well, Bill Ruttenberg is right there, and his wife already wants to kill me for how many books I send him. So, and I know he's going to love these things, and I also know that he has less access to a smaller variety of used books than I do. So I might get some of those, but I don't buy any of these things on my own. I get them from publishers as they come to bear. Question number 13 is, what would you consider to be your holy grail of Abe Lincoln books? I don't have one. Maybe that 1860 biography, maybe William Dean Howells on Abraham Lincoln. Certainly, when a copy of that shows up at the Brattle, I'm sure that one will. I'm sure that a later, 1890s reprint, or more specifically, an 1866 reprint. And 1867 and 1868, William Dean Howells was an extremely well-known author by that point. I'm sure that there were a million reprints of that book in the wake of Lincoln's death. If a copy like that were to show up at the Brattle, I would grab it instantly. Of course I would, but not as a holy grail. I just don't share that kind of deep interest in Lincoln. I find him fascinating and genuinely admirable. I honestly do think he's a rare example of a character in American history who literally grew in his personality in the time we see him in the public spotlight. Instead of shifting around the furniture, I think he actually deepened as a person. And I think that's fascinating, but that doesn't translate to the kind of interest that, for instance, Bill has in Lincoln, and a lot of other people have in Lincoln. It just doesn't for me. Let's see here. Question number 14 is, what are your top 5 Abraham Lincoln books? I jotted down 5 here. The Annotated Lincoln would be one of them, definitely. Also, Bill mentions in his own video, Carl Sandburg's Lincoln is a landmark, just an absolute landmark. It's an incredible reading experience, just amazingly good. I know we think of Sandburg as a poet, but his Lincoln books are terrific. And like I said, the final days and assassination of Abraham Lincoln tend to bring out the best in writers, also in performers. I saw a one-man show at Ford's Theater a long time ago. I think it was called Mr. Lincoln. The actor who played Lincoln was Roy Dotrice, who my older viewers will know as the old father figure, the Gandalf figure in the TV show Beauty and the Beast. And my slightly younger readers, or slightly younger viewers, will know him as the narrator of George R.R. Martin's Song of Ice and Fire on audio. But I was it was just a riveting performance that he did, because he moves all over the stage, all over the different time periods of Lincoln's life, and all over the different moods as well. And without any transition, he's not leaving the stage. It's incredible. It's an incredible performance. And the finale of Mr. Lincoln, it's wrenching. It's really, really well done. Lincoln is sitting in a chair. He's talking to Mary Todd Lincoln. She's not on stage, but he's talking to her about how soon this will all be over and we can go back to Springfield and just live in peace. And won't that be wonderful? He's patting the arms of his chair. He's talking himself into a good mood. Roy Dotrice is doing this, sitting in this chair on the stage, and dark everywhere around, just a spotlight on him. He's talking himself into a good mood, and he's patting the arm of his chair. And then Roy Dotrice puts his head back and tips it awkwardly to the side with his mouth open and his eyes open. And then the lights go down. And you realize that that's what you've seen. You've seen the assassination at Ford's Theater. That's how the story ends. That's not actually writing, because there's no words to it, but it's amazingly well conceived. And my digression was that Sandburg does the assassination of Lincoln better than anybody. Better than any account that I've ever read, and I've read a million accounts of it. I think it's one of the 3 or 4 places in Sandburg's Lincoln where the narrative actually ascends to the power of poetry. I just love it. But I also have here another predictable one it's in Bill's video, Doris Kearns Goodwin's books, Team of Rivals, which is big and heavy and monumental and fantastic. Just fantastic. It is mainly Lincoln, the political animal, but you get all of Lincoln in the book. It stands as a really good biography of him. Then Ronald White did a book called A. Lincoln. It's a 1-volume biography. It's fairly programmatic. It's well done. It's insightful. It uses a lot of the primary sources well. It's usually the book that I will recommend if someone wants a 1-volume life of Lincoln and they don't want to read 20. It'll usually be A. Lincoln that I recommend. But the last one that I want to recommend, I don't know if it's still in print, but it is necessary reading. We have some figures in United States history who are the relentless subjects of hagiography, relentlessly so. Lincoln is a big one. Washington is a big one. Franklin Delano Roosevelt is a big one. They're big objects of hero worship, of saints' lives. It can poison biographies of them. Even ones that are well-meaning often can't escape from it and don't really want to, because hagiography sells in the bookstores. And there's a book out there that is a great antidote to that. Now, I think the Annotated Lincoln is a good antidote to that, even though it doesn't mean to be. But the last book that I want to recommend here of my top 5 means to be an antidote. And this is Tom the Lorenzo. It's called The Problem with Lincoln. And it's scathing. It's just scathing. It definitely ends Lincoln's political career. So it's really entertaining, really knowledgeable about Lincoln, really, really well done. Then question number 15 is, if you had to recommend one book to somebody who's interested in reading about his life, what would it be and why? And like I said, I will recommend A. Lincoln, but only with lots of caveats, because that's not how I do book recommending. I would need to know the person. I'm not so interested in what they want to read about. I want to know who they are, what they like to read, so then I can make a good recommendation. A personalized recommendation could very well be that the person who's asking for a book about Lincoln would want The Problem with Lincoln. That would be the one that would get them involved in the subject, and not A. Lincoln at all. And although Sandberg's Lincoln is probably the best, biggest work on Lincoln that ever been written by anyone, it's not a recommend. You can't recommend a big, fat trilogy, a soup to nuts trilogy to someone. You'll repulse them. Most of the time, you'll repulse them if that's what you recommend. So I know the question has the best of intentions, but I don't do book recommendations that way. I don't do book recommendations casually. Certainly not one size fits all. The closest that I come would be A. Lincoln. It's a very good, very knowledgeable one-volume biography, but I'd want to do more than that. I would only do that as a default if someone had no time, didn't want to offer any specifics, that sort of thing. But anyway, that is the Abraham Lincoln book tag. Bill Ruttenberg only tags 2 people because he is under the assumption that most people won't be interested enough in the subject or knowledgeable enough to answer all of these questions. I suppose, maybe, that's in a way true, but if you are, feel free. If you're a Lincoln fan and you have a BookTube channel, feel free to do this tag. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.